Hello and welcome to another video about the case fights of Jubilar Richard. For quite a while now, I've wanted to write something about my thoughts on volume 15. I already made a German video where I read and commented on the final extra chapter, Coda Vacation. But that chapter affected me so much emotionally that I was never really able to put all of my thoughts into writing afterward. There's just so much behind it that a simple surface level text could never fully express what I think about it or what it makes me feel. So in this video, I want to talk about the ending of Jubilar Richard and what makes it so special to me. That being said, I should mention that I've only read the official English releases up to volume 11. For volume 14, I only translated one or two passages here and there. And for volume 15, I read the web version while it was being released, chapter by chapter. I think most people watching this video already know what happens at the end. Richard and Seiki propose to each other and go on their honeymoon to the Maldives. Maybe you also know that they share their first kiss there. A lot of fans were happy about that, including me. But I want to talk about why these moments are not simply a payoff meant to make fans happy at the end. Because one important factor is that Richard and Seiki already had these feelings long before that. For personal reasons, they just couldn't bring themselves to take that final step. And that's why I have to say, what moves me so much about volume 15 is not that Richard and Seiki finally get together in the end. It's the question of why two people who had already chosen each other years ago still needed so much time before they could fully allow themselves to embrace that love. And I think the answer lies in the fact that, for a very long time, Richard and Seiki didn't see their love as something they were simply allowed to accept. Instead, both of them carry their own kind of guilt. And that's what I want to talk about today. So let's start with a simple question. Since when have Richard and Seiki basically been a couple? You can go back through the story again and again and keep asking yourself the same thing. Couldn't you already see them as a couple here? The misunderstandings from outsiders start as early as volume 1. In volume 4, they are briefly engaged. In volume 6, Seiki practically proposes already. In volume 9, Seiki realizes that he wants to stay by Richard's side for the rest of his life. And at the end of volume 10, we get the first major turning point, when Seiki becomes Richard's personal secretary and partner, because he wants to stay by his side, both professionally and privately. So are they already a couple at any of these points? Maybe, maybe not. I think that's something every reader has to decide for themselves. After that comes the period where everything keeps escalating more and more. They work together, they travel around the world, live in different places, and simply enjoy spending time together. I'm pretty sure we'll learn a lot more details about what exactly they were doing during this time once the third part of the story is released. But one thing is certain, they keep growing closer and closer, and no matter how often they end up separated for a while, they always come back even closer than before. There is a short story called Masago Nasu. In it, Seiki, Richard, and Shaw attend a gem and mineral show in Munich. On the surface, the story is mostly about Shaw's late wife. But in the end, the message gets reflected back onto Richard and Seiki as well. Tell each other that you love each other before it's too late. Take that step. Form that connection. And yet, even here, they can't really do it. Once again, all we see is how close they are, how much they love each other, and how badly they want to take that next step, but somehow they just can't. And honestly, at this point, I think this might be the part of their relationship that I find the most interesting. They live in the way they want to live. They appreciate each other in their own way. They know that the other person loves them just as much. And all of that exists without labels, without official promises or anything like that. I imagine it as something that feels incredibly free and incredibly tense at the same time. A phase somewhere between, I love you more than anything, and why can't we take this final step? But eventually, we arrive at what was probably inevitable. They have a conversation about whether they should actually try having a romantic relationship. And that's what leads them to Paris. But contrary to what many readers probably expected, not much really happens there. In fact, Paris should have been the moment when everything became easier. Richard and Seigi are alone together in one of the most romantic cities in the world, and they've already agreed that they want to explore this side of their relationship. And yet, what Paris actually reveals is that romance alone cannot solve their problem. They try holding hands, but they can't keep it up for long. And Seigi's question in front of the Eiffel Tower whether they should kiss ends up feeling surprisingly unromantic as well. Seigi feels a tremendous amount of pressure here because of the expectations surrounding the situation. He loves Richard more than anything, but if the world expects him to suddenly play the role of the perfect romantic partner, then he just can't do it. And Richard notices that too, which is why nothing happens. And for why Seigi struggles with it so much, we get a much clearer answer later on. This is also the point in the story where everything involving Minoru, Seigi's younger half-brother, starts to pick up momentum. Richard and Seigi cut their trip short, and eventually things lead to Seigi living together with Minoru so he can take care of him. Richard, however, decides not to move in with them right away, and I think this is where you can see their problem very clearly. Because both of them are focused entirely on the other person, rather than on themselves and what they actually want. Richard, for example, keeps holding himself back because he doesn't want to have a negative impact on Seigi's life. There's a short story that takes place shortly before Seigi moves back to Japan, and it's pretty obvious there that Seigi wants to live together with Richard. But Richard is worried that Seigi would suffer because of living with a man and a child. At this point, they've known each other for almost 10 years, and Richard still hasn't been able to let go of this fear that he's carried with him almost since the very beginning. Meanwhile, Seigi has a problem of his own, one that he's been carrying around since the start of the series. He wants to repay Richard for everything Richard has done for him, and over time, that develops into something else. Seigi wants to matter to Richard in this kind of relationship. He wants to be worthy of standing at Richard's side as his partner, but in the process, he completely loses sight of himself and what he actually wants. And I think that's the key issue here. Both of them are carrying certain kinds of guilt, and that's exactly why they can't take that final step. The thing that finally pushes them past that barrier happens in volume 15, with Seigi's accident. Seigi loses consciousness for a short time, and there's a lot of drama surrounding whether Richard is even allowed to see him in the hospital, because officially he isn't family. So once Seigi recovers, they finally propose to each other, and honestly, the proposal is much more legal than romantic, where many other stories would end. This is really just a necessary step, a way of showing the outside world that they truly are a couple. And this is also where I want to mention how much I appreciate Tsujimura's criticism of Japanese politics, because same-sex couples in Japan still cannot legally marry, which makes their proposal something that is meaningful mainly between the two of them, rather than something officially recognized by the state. But that's almost an entirely different discussion. I just really like how political the series can become at times. We see even more character development in the extra chapter Coda Vacation, where the two of them are spending their honeymoon in the Maldives. Because this chapter focuses on something they haven't really been able to express until now, the romantic and physical side of their relationship. We see Seigi wanting to kiss Richard, but once again, something inside him holds him back. At the same time, we learn from Richard that he does feel desire towards Seigi, because he doesn't love Seigi because of the kind of relationship they have. He loves Seigi simply because he is Seigi. Because of this, Seigi finally tells Richard about the sexual trauma from his childhood, when he was harassed by a girl. The guilt he felt back then stayed with him for years, and because of that, he could never fully relax into a romantic situation, since it always reminded him of what happened. He also talks about wanting to seek therapy for it. But I imagine that simply telling Richard the truth must have felt incredibly liberating already. Afterward, while reflecting on everything by himself, Seiki begins to realize something important. The guilt toward Richard, the feeling that he isn't giving enough back in this relationship, that he isn't giving Richard what he deserves, is ultimately baseless. Nobody is expecting anything from him, and least of all, Richard. Richard is simply happy to be by Seiki's side, no matter what shape their relationship takes. And it's only after reaching that realization that Seiki goes back to Richard. When Richard tells him that he feels safer with Seiki than with anyone else, and that Seiki doesn't need to suppress his own feelings in order to protect him, Seiki suddenly wants to kiss Richard. Not because he thinks he should, not because it's expected of him, but because he genuinely wants to. And this is what makes their first kiss so special to me. For the first time, Seiki isn't acting according to someone else's expectations. He's acting according to his own feelings. Even if he's not exactly good at kissing, Richard makes it pretty clear that he'd be happy to receive more kisses in the future, which, naturally, makes Seiki very happy as well. There's so much happening in these scenes. Richard and Seiki finally managed to take a step that they were never able to take during all those years before. Not because their feelings suddenly changed, but because they finally confronted their own problems, listened to themselves, and learned to accept what they actually wanted. And because of that, they can become better partners for each other. And the beautiful thing is that this isn't the end, it's only the beginning. Their lives continue long after this moment, even if we, as readers, don't get to follow every step of that journey. And that's exactly why my favorite moment in the entire volume isn't even the kiss. The next day, Seiki sits together with Richard and reflects on his life up until this point. He even has a conversation with his inner child, the lonely, sad and broken child he used to be. And now, for perhaps the first time, Seiki truly sees how much that child suffered, and at the same time, he thanks him for surviving, because without him, Seiki wouldn't be where he is today, here, in Richard's arms, on the Maldives. I honestly think you have to read this scene yourselves to fully feel the depth behind it, to see just how much Seiki is finally beginning to appreciate himself. We've followed so many highs and lows through his life. We've seen him struggle, make mistakes, grow and keep moving forward. But seeing him finally arrive at a place where he can be at peace with himself, seeing him genuinely happy, really touches my heart. I would love to talk more about their return to Japan, or how the very last scene of the novel shows them eating strawberry parfaits together at Shiseido Parlor. But all of these moments share one thing in common. There are moments where Richard and Seiki are simply living their lives, not searching for happiness anymore, but living in it. I think that's why Jubilar Richard is a story where the journey is truly the destination. You don't read Jubilar Richard just to see the kiss. You read Jubilar Richard to understand why that kiss took 10 years, to understand what the proposal means and also what it cannot mean. This ending will always hold a special place in my heart, and I hope I was able to explain it, at least a little bit, why. Thank you for watching. Bye.